Well, thank you, Mr. Klein, and welcome to Michigan. Welcome to Mackinac Island. I hope you don't get off the island tonight until you've had a pecan ball. You don't want to miss that. And if you'll stick around.
Something you dance at, the pecan ball?
You will dance if you eat one. And if you'll stick around another day, we're going to have a heck of a bourbon party here tomorrow night. So. You have been very effective education reformer and advocate for education reform. You and Mayor Bloomberg put a number of solid reforms and initiatives in place for the New York public schools, and yet now we're seeing under a new administration those reforms threaten possibly being unraveled. You gave the challenge here to push ahead reform, to think about making children smarter, and you made the prediction in 5 years you'd see a revolution in education. Is that possible when we're still fighting adult battles and fighting turf wars and letting politics trump the goal of making kids smarter?
It makes it much harder, and I'll be candid with you. I mean, politics has always been the thing that put kids in second place, because as my governor in New York says, the kids are the only group without a union, and they're not powerful enough to influence the outcomes of the discussions. But what you see in New York is very interesting, is there's a new status quo. So the parents of the children in the charter schools, when I started, there were 15. By the time the end of the mayor's 12 years, there were 183 of them. Those parents became a powerful political force for change. So even though you'll see some things rock backward and some things rock forward, increasingly, I think what you'll see is a gathering tide. And fortunately, there are lots of cities, lots of states where different policies can be tried. But it would be a whole lot easier on so many issues in America if we didn't have these large, well-financed special interests that are able to dominate the political discussion. And you can do that in so many different areas. But my fear is that education, it shows up so slowly. And that's what worries me. Because when I said before, I could tell in the third grade about most kids. I wasn't kidding. But you don't feel it until a kid drops out in high school, and it's way too late. And so I'm hoping that there's an increasing constituency of leadership that's really willing to do what I think Mayor Bloomberg did, which is put children first.
As we move into an emphasis on STEM in our schools, STEM education, do we also need to change the way the classroom looks and operates? Can you do effective STEM education in the traditional manner of having a teacher stand in front of rows of students, or do we need to move to a different model, perhaps project-based learning?
So there's a two-part answer. The answer is, can we do it? Yes. We've often educated kids with a teacher in front of them. The question is, why should we do it? Why shouldn't we make it a lot easier? It's not just project-based, but I put up on the screen a picture of a little nanobot inside a cell trying to repair the mitochondria. And this gives a kid an opportunity to do things in a very different way. Same thing with project and applied learning. There's no reason why we can't have kids doing the kinds of things, not just doing mathematics, but actually doing mathematics to teach them how to build bridges. And by the same token, we can make the classroom much, much more personalized. We had a thing in New York called a School of One, in which different kids every day would use different ways of learning, some online, some offline, some small groups, some working with a teacher. And these are the kind of new and different ways we need to think about it, but it's not unique to STEM. The one thing I think we need to be careful about is STEM is very important in terms of the relevant skills to our kids, but trust me, kids who can't read, write, and speak in coherent, persuasive sentences are not going to succeed. I don't care how technical those kids are.
Well, and that would bring me to my next question. Our public school systems, many of our public school systems, particularly our large urban systems, are having trouble getting the basics right now. Layering on something as sophisticated as STEM is going to be an enormous challenge. Do we have the resources, the will, the skills to pull this off?
We have the resources. The question is, do we have the will? And that's the political question we started with, Nolan. I think in candor, this is doable. What I said before about teaching, there's no reason why there are some countries where teachers are really coming from the top of their academic classes, getting the kind of content training in math, science, technology, English language arts, and so forth, that can do that for us in America. We have instead adopted a model where, as I said, virtually anyone who shows up can get a teaching degree. You have virtually no admissions requirements. I mean, 25, 30 years ago, Al Shanker, the most iconic teachers union leader in America, called for a 3-year apprenticeship bar exam, content knowledge testing before you could become a full-time teacher. Think how different that world would be and how important it is. And I've met many young kids. I'm on the board of Teach for America. I've met many young kids who would give their careers to teaching today if the system were rational and were driven by excellence rather than driven by all the rules and all the bureaucracy and all the hand-tying that's driven by it. So the answer is, I do think we have the capacity. I think, like so many things in America, it's a question of political will, and that's where we need really great leadership.
This is a more demanding curriculum. You're asking more of both students and their parents. How do you get past the resistance, the pushback to asking children to do more, work harder, take on a tougher course schedule?
Again, it's a question, it's an enormous challenge, but the alternative, which I've tried to spend a lot of time with a lot of parents explaining, is it may feel good to do it the easy way, but if your children are not prepared for what's going to happen in a global high-tech society, you've got to worry about it. I'll give you one statistic. In 1980 compared to now, the wages of a college graduate has gone up almost 60%. The wages of a high school graduate has gone down 11%, and the wages of a high school dropout has gone down 22%. Now think about that. If you're a high school graduate, you're on a negative trajectory, and your income is going to go down, not up. Now, when you explain that to parents, I think they begin to understand how important it is to do things in a very different way. I have no illusion that this is easy. On the other hand, things that are important are not easy. Problems that are easy get solved. Things that are important are hard, as we've seen, for example, in Detroit and what Detroit is going through right now. But the fact that they're hard doesn't mean they're not solvable. It means that we've got to be prepared to do things differently, to think about problems, to make sacrifices in a way that we weren't prepared to do in the past. But that's a product of great leadership and a citizenry that awakens to the fact that what we were doing is not working. When I said to the folks in this room, how many schools in Detroit would you send your kids to? Most of you don't want to raise your hand for too many. But whose kids should go to those schools? And if they're not good for our kids, then how can they be good for other people's kids? In New York, I made that an acronym. I used to say, I don't want to hear about OPCs, other people's children. If it's not for your kid, you can't be good enough for OPCs.
You're also a champion for the Common Core standards. What's the connection between Common Core and STEM?
Well, Common Core, certainly in math, there's a real connection, which is, again, we're not teaching kids the computational skills that they need. And I used to find, by the time kids got to high school, few of them were really capable of mastering algebra, much less the kind of coding requirements or obviously calculus that's increasingly going to be needed. And so what we found, again, is we were teaching to the 8th grade level. And that's just not adequate. And Common Core sets out the standards. Now, what I've always said, standards are important, but they're not as important as curriculum. And so to have Common Core standards without really demanding curriculum will continue to sell our kids short.
Now, I'm a liberal arts guy, and a number of people in this room probably are as well. By emphasizing STEM to the degree you propose, do we risk raising children who are less adept at the arts and humanities, less well-rounded?
Look, I'm the first to say, and I've said it several times already, if our kids can't read, they can't write, they don't understand literature and history, that's a huge risk. In fact, I think the smart people say we ought to change STEM to STEAM, and right in the middle of the ST should be A for the arts, so that we understand to be fully educated is not just to be a technocrat. If we turn the world over to the technocrats, shame on us. And I think the great leaders, whether they're innovators and whatever, I mean, my friend Fareed Zakaria just gave a speech, graduation speech to Sarah Lawrence, and he says he thought the best preparation for the global high-tech economy of the 21st century is still a world-class liberal arts education. Sign me up for that agenda.
Mr. Klein, thanks for being with us. Safe travels.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Please welcome the President and CEO of the Skillman Foundation, Tonya Allen, Executive Director of Community Relations for the Kalamazoo Promise, Vaughn Washington Jr., and the Executive Director of Teach for America Detroit, Tiffany Williams.
Welcome.
Thank you.
You'll all agree that we just heard a very stimulating and very passionate argument for doing education better and doing education smarter in Michigan. Tiffany, I want to start with you, if I can. What are your teachers seeing and doing in the classroom? What are the innovations along the STEM education lines that you're seeing that work here?
Yeah. So I think two of the main things that they're really focusing on is making sure that they're becoming masters of their content. They're leaning on their support and their training from the University of Michigan and from Oakland, and then also just their backgrounds in physics and chemistry and in mathematics to make sure that that's their first priority. And the second piece is just making sure that they are leveraging every opportunity possible to connect their kids to the outside world, to make sure that they're taking their kids to the Delta math competition, to make sure that they're leveraging that first robotics initiative that the governor mentioned at every moment. So those are the main two levers that they're leaning on.
Tony, your organization commits a lot of money to education innovation. What are you seeing that is really taking root, that is really working?
Well, one of the things that I'm most excited about is that we have a couple of things in our region that are going really well, and we need to focus and leverage those things. So the first is that we have personalized learning in our region. So in Detroit, in the Detroit area, we have more personalized learning slots or seats, more students in that kind of education system than any other city in the country. And it's being done by the EAA, it's being done by Cornerstone, and it's being done by Way. Now, I think that we all have complaints about what's happening in the EAA. But I think what we need to focus on is what is working and figure out how we stop fighting against each other and figure out how we deploy this great practice and this great model to more students. We have to figure out, and you heard this from Joel, we have to figure out how we educate kids where they're at, and we have to focus on competencies, not just on seat time.
Well, you mentioned something just now. You said we have to stop fighting. We seem in this state to be trying a lot of different things, and it seems everything we try is attacked by one interest or another interest. Would we be better served by a unified approach to education reform and a single model of educating our children?
Well, I don't think it's one particular model, but I do think that we have to focus on accountability. I think that we can't talk about we want to advance entrepreneurship in the business sector, but we don't want to advance entrepreneurial ideas in the education system. We have to have both, but we have to have a strong sense of accountability. We have to make sure if we're giving teachers, schools permission to support and educate our children, that they actually deliver. And we do not focus on those things. You know, we caution at it because we think that it's a really difficult job. Well, there's not a person in this room that doesn't feel like they have a difficult job. We sign up for it. So if you're going to sign up for the job, you got to deliver. And I think that we have to be focused on that as a state. And we have to be declarative about what we expect from our teachers, what we expect from our schools, and what we expect from our students.
Vaughn, the Chamber today released a poll on attitudes, parental and student attitudes on the auto industry and careers in the auto industry. And there wasn't a whole lot of confidence that those would be good long-term careers. As we start to implement STEM in the classroom, what's the importance of connecting that curriculum, that education, to the workplace, to careers?
It's vital. If we're not making those connections, then we're going to lose very early. We need to start very early and often with introducing students to these opportunities. Now, a lot of us have an idea about what age it is when a student starts to think about going to work. Well, that's not till high school, or that's not till middle school. And actually, it's much sooner than that. They start to get a foundation. They start to build competencies much earlier, and decisions and taking a look at that. And it used to be many years ago, and I remember a time when I was in college. I was very active. I was actively in college. I was doing well. I had two friends who were working in the auto industry, and it was everything I could do to try to get them to help me to get in. They worked there because their uncle or their father did. This no longer happens, and so the sooner that they have an idea about these careers, the sooner they have an idea that they can be critical thinkers, problem solvers, the better off we're going to be.
Right. And can I just say, because I think this is really important, exposure is extraordinarily important when it comes to STEM careers. And so the research actually shows a couple of things. One, that if you are in a college-educated family and you have a career in STEM, then you're more likely to go into it. If you're in a college-educated family and you don't have STEM, you'll be like my daughter who wants to be a princess and a fashion designer. But if you're not in either of those and you don't have exposure to STEM careers, then it actually takes more dosage. We have to make sure that those young people really understand what it means to be in these careers. And I think that's one of the places that we can see the corporate partnerships in our community to make sure that young people are getting real work experiences in these kinds of places during the summer months.
Well, Tiffany, speak to that, because we hear employers in this state say they can't get the skilled workers they need. What responsibility does the private sector, do our employers have to work with the schools, to help with the STEM education, to be advocates for education that prepares kids for the economy?
Yeah, I definitely think it could look like us bringing in mentors, right? So I think about what Brenda Belcher is doing over at Ben Carson, where she has the Future Docs program, and they have doctors from all over the city and all over the state coming in, mentoring those students, ensuring that they're not only advancing in their studies in school, but that they also have opportunities to get into the hospitals to make sure that they understand what that actually looks like. I think the piece is really heartbreaking to me personally is that when we talk about what our students need, we forget to mention the fact that only 4% of underrepresented minorities are actually engineering eligible by the time they graduate high school. So when they get to the door of Wayne State, when they get to the door of the University of Michigan, even if they gain access to those schools, they're not able to maintain the level of rigor and the level of discipline needed for them to be successful. And so when we talk about this STEM initiative, we have to make sure that cities like Detroit, where we have over 90% of our folks who are people of color, we recognize that we are running the risk of leaving a large segment of the population out of the fastest growing fields in our country.
Well, Vaughn, your school district is probably the best example of public-private partnerships, in that Kalamazoo Promise being privately funded, the promise to send any kid who can qualify for college to college, paid for by benefactors. Is it more? Do we need more than money from our business community? Do we need more than donations? Do we need a more active involvement with our students in our schools?
We definitely need a greater partnership. And it used to be where one thought they functioned in one world and the other functioned in another world, and you just kind of sent them on, and that can't happen anymore. It has to be a complete partnership. Programs like the Kalamazoo Promise, offering students an opportunity, removing barriers so that they can go on and continue their education, are extremely important. We need to continue those. A scholarship program that's in perpetuity. One of the most beautiful things about it is you can say it with confidence. It's not going to end. Trust is a big issue. So when we get to a point where we can go out and we can be confident, educators aren't thinking this is just the next flavor of the month, it's not going to change after that, and we can have programs that are going to be sustainable, then we stand a much better chance of being successful. But those partnerships are important. The scholarship itself, a barrier being removed, is far removed from where they are when they're early in their education, trying to figure themselves out, life getting in the way, and any number of things that are taking place. That's when those community partnerships come in, those resources that can fill those gaps.
Tonya, what's a true partnership look like between a business and a school?
Well, I think it doesn't look like a weak handshake. And what I mean by that is that we, as I think a private public partnership, we're not focusing enough on dosage. We're going in, we're giving money, we're volunteering, but if we really want to make a difference in our schools, we have to go after curriculum. And I know that's something that business will say, well, that's not my expertise. Well, it's not the school's expertise either. They don't know about STEM careers, and we have to help create that. So I think one of the things that we're advancing that I think is pretty important for us as a region is a program where we actually bring in industry into the school buildings and you integrate it into curriculum, and it's through a model called Link Learning out of California. It's been extraordinarily successful, and it allows businesses to bring their true talents, their expertise, and build that pipeline, because this is what we're really talking about. When we talk about STEM education, what we're really saying is we need a pipeline for our future workforce. And so we have to create that in a very intentional way, and we have to be focused and look at eyes on, head on, focused.
Tiffany, I mean, it's math and it's science.
Yes.
You know, that's not for everyone, or at least not everyone thinks it's for them. These are difficult subjects. Yeah. And I'll ask you the same thing I asked Mr. Klein is, what sort of pushback do you get from students and parents about the tougher demands of a STEM curriculum?
Yeah. So the biggest pushback that we get is they want to know how they're going to apply it, right? When I go into classrooms at the kindergarten level and at the high school level, it's how am I actually going to make sense of this? How am I going to use this after I leave the classroom? And the parents are asking us the same question. So we need to make sure that our teachers, when they stand in front of them, that they're confident and they're competent and they're able to deliver that content in a way that allows our students not simply to access it to get to the right answer, but to actually make meaning of it and allow them to apply it to real life problems. And that would allow us to leverage those public partnerships when they're coming in and helping us create the curriculum.
Is it a lot more difficult? I mean, is it a lot more homework, a lot more intense classroom instruction?
It can be. It can be. And in many instances, when you're talking about project-based learning, when you're talking about the linked learning, when you're talking about creating real experiences, having students take part in those first robotics initiatives, having them actually prepare for almost an entire year to enter competitions across the state, it requires additional time in the classroom and time at home. And that's a part of us actually reshaping the narrative of what it's actually going to take to make sure our kids are successful, and it takes hard work and it takes time.
Vaughn, okay, go ahead.
I want to push on this because I think a lot of times when we talk about STEM careers, we think about young people as we have to figure out who are the geniuses that can fit in this work. Well, that's actually not true. I mean, STEM careers is about perseverance, not ability. So if you can stick with it, if you have the grit to stick with it and learn a subject matter, then you can actually be successful in it. And it's not just about every engineer, right? It's science, it's technology, it's engineering, it's math, and others would say it's medicine, right? And so we have to think about how we make sure that we're letting kids stay focused on the competency in a way that they actually build the competency, build a skill set to apply this versus just thinking you either have a proclivity for it or not.
Or you don't.
But what about literature and art and music and social studies and history and civics? Do these get lost or de-emphasized or underemphasized in the STEM curriculum?
Well, I think that what I would just say, and a lot of people are talking about STEM should be STEAM, right? That you need
That's
to
what
add
the
arts.
UPrep schools are just added with
You need to
with
add
Mosaic.
arts to it. And I think what we're really talking about is how do we ensure that our current student population have the ingenuity that has powered America. And so we want to make sure that we open it up, I think, to arts so that we make sure that the young people are curious, that we're stroking their curiosity and they get to explore all of those different ideas. I think that with STEM, most young people don't get to STEM. They don't get to actually spur that creativity to explore it because we close out the careers before they really understand.
Well, Tiffany, is STEM the death of a classic liberal arts education?
I don't think so, because when it's done right, you have teachers collaborating across the board. You have the liberal arts teachers, you have the social studies teachers sitting right next to those science teachers, those math teachers, talking about what will it take in terms of collective action, in terms of how we design curriculum, in terms of how we actually deliver curriculum to make sure that there aren't any disconnects for our kids. And so when it's done right, it will not be the death of
So what age?
arts.
I mean, where does it start?
For us now, we're starting in the 6th grade.
Okay.
So getting the opportunity, and a part of that is just limited resources. So more resources that are going into this opportunity, you can look at even starting even sooner. But project-based learning gets them in their hands-on, and a number of things that you did even before the 6th grade was a lot of project-based learning. In kindergarten, we're working with our hands, and 1st grade, we continue to work with our hands, and we're doing a number of those things, and then that kind of goes away. So there's still opportunities for that, but 6th grade in Kalamazoo County, they've started in the 6th grade working, and it continues to grow.
Yvonne, we just got a few seconds left, and I don't want to let you get out of here without giving us an update on the Kalamazoo Promise. When that first came in being, the thought was it would increase college participation amongst your students, but also keep the students in the district. Has it succeeded in doing those things?
It did. But with the original announcement 8 years ago with the Kalamazoo Promise, in the first year, the school district saw an infusion of students of close to 1,000 students. The 5 years prior to that, many students were leaving the district. There was choice. There were a number of things that were taking place. Over 8 years now, $55 million has been given away in scholarship dollars and continuing to go, and just under 1,000 students have completed bachelor's degrees, certificates, and or associate's degrees.
Has your college attendance rate increased?
Yes, it has. Yeah, 95% of the students that graduate from the Kalamazoo Public Schools yearly now are attempting post-secondary education.
Well, we're out of time. We want to thank our panel. We appreciate you being here. Thank Mr. Klein again.